Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems. So come on, guys. I mean, China and India happened way before anything happened in Ukraine.
India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar has held talks with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. Mr. Jaishankar said the country will continue buying Russian oil even as Western nations turn away from it.
India-Russia relationship has worked to advantage. So if it works to my advantage, I would like to keep that going. As today the world's third largest consumer of oil and gas, a consumer where the levels of income are not very high, it is our fundamental obligation to ensure that the Indian consumer has the best possible access on the most advantageous terms to international markets. The European Union between February 24th and 17th November has imported more fossil fuel from Russia than the next 10 countries combined. Just as I were to give you an India comparison, the oil import in European Union is like 6 times what India has imported. Gas is infinity times because we don't import. Whereas European Union has imported $50 billion worth, 50 billion euros worth. I would very respectfully suggest maybe European Union is actually doing something very much more than India is doing at this point of time.
Уважаемые дамы и господа, начинается пресс-конференция по итогам.
We discussed areas where there's a natural convergence of interest between India and Russia. I think a large part of it would be determined by market because in our country business is mostly in private sector hands. But I don't think people should read anything more into it other than the legitimate expectations of any trading country to increase its trade.
Geht es hier um Persönlichkeitsrechte, deswegen können wir auch darüber nicht mehr sagen, denn der Fall läuft noch vor dem Familiengericht.
It's a great pleasure to address you all at the conclusion of our talks today. So let me say to the Minister that I deeply appreciate her visit, which of course comes just as we are concluding this year. I think we have met on a number of occasions at the Intergovernmental Commission, at the Munich Security Conference, at Paris during the Bali meeting, on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. So it's really been a very intensive but a very rewarding interaction throughout this year. And I'm truly glad that we are concluding that, Minister, with your visit to India. I know that there's been a bit of a gap since you were last here in your personal capacity. And I'm happy that you will also have a chance tomorrow to go around a little bit and see some of the changes which have taken place here. India and Germany have a long history of close and warm relations. We are marking the 70th year of the establishment of our diplomatic relationship last year. And our strategic partnership, which is more than 2 decades old, has really been bolstered by greater political exchanges, ever-expanding trade, more investment, and a stronger people-to-people relationship. 2022 has been a year of particular note for us. We've held the 6th India-Germany intergovernmental consultations in Berlin in May, and this was the first since the current government in Germany, led by Chancellor Scholz, came to power. And this unique mechanism of the IGC, it's really ensured a whole of the government interaction with multiple ministers on both sides meeting their counterparts. And it was notable that we saw the launch of the India-Germany partnership on green and sustainable development, and I think in our conversations today, actually SDGs and climate issues, even though that's not my direct jurisdiction, these were also part of our discussions. Now, the IGC gave me an opportunity to spend time with Minister Baerbock in Berlin at that time, and I really thank you again for the warmth of your hospitality then and for the time that you set aside for us to discuss things. Now, today we have really spent the morning exchanging views on the major international issues of the day, apart from our bilateral relationship. And this included the conflict in Ukraine, the Indo-Pacific strategic situation, developments pertaining to Afghanistan and Pakistan to some degree, Iran, Syria, and really each one of us brought to this set of issues our perspectives, and I think at least I can say this, I found it very useful, very rewarding to listen to your perspectives on many matters. We also briefly touched upon the multilateral issues. You all know that India and Germany interact in the framework of the G4 when it comes to the reform of the UN Security Council. We had a discussion on India's G20 presidency, which comes just as Germany itself is concluding a very successful G7 presidency. And I know that we have Germany's strong support as we take up our responsibility in the G20. Among the issues we discussed was also cooperation in third countries, in other regions. I think today our relationship has matured to a point where our cooperation should be visible more and more to the rest of the world. So that was something we discussed. How can we make this happen more effectively? We already have some projects in Cameroon, in Ghana, in Malawi, and Peru. But the idea was really how can we be doing very much more. I also welcome Germany's decision to participate in the India-Pacific Oceans Initiative that we had announced in 2019. Where our economic ties are concerned, you all know that India, Germany is our largest partner in the EU. I think we both recognize that the business climate today, the business enthusiasm today is very much stronger. And we certainly, as foreign ministers, would like to channelize that and use it as a positive source of energy for the relationship. We are today supporting the India-EU negotiations on trade, investment, and geographical indicators. We hope that they will progress well. The third round of negotiations on the FTA has just concluded. But I think on a broader scale, I think both of us spent time talking about how to create more reliable and resilient supply chains. In the digital world, how to encourage more trust and transparency. I think we have a common interest, India and Germany, in ensuring not just a stronger global economy, but also a more secure global economy. So as you can see, on this range of issues, really it's been a very productive morning. There was some talk between us on people-to-people relationships. We have just signed the Migration and Mobility Partnership Agreement, and I do think that this will be a very strong signal for a greater, not just a greater flow of talent and skills between our two societies, but I think also as a basis for a more contemporary partnership. One issue which also came up were the visa challenges, and we hope that some of these are addressed in the coming months so that the backlog can be cleared, and I have every confidence that there will be that effort made by our partner. A specific issue which came up, some of you may be familiar with this case. This relates to a child called Ariha Shah. So we have concerns that the child should be in her linguistic, religious, cultural and social environment. This is her right. And our embassy is pursuing the matter with German authorities, but it was also a subject which I had brought up with the minister. Overall, I would say our bilateral relationship today is very wide, it's very deep, and it really covers, all the key areas: political, strategic, economic, SMT, people-to-people, education. But it can grow very much. And I think we, the two foreign ministers, I think are particularly committed to make that happen. Our meeting today, our discussions were helpful in that regard. Once again, really, Minister, I thank you so much for being here and for partnering me in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now invite Her Excellency Minister Baerbock to make her remarks.
Thank you very much, and I will speak in German.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jai Shankarji, thank you very much for the warm welcome you have given me here in New Delhi. I started my visit to India today, as many have done before me, at the Memorial Gandhi Smriti. And I've always been deeply moved by India's rich history, but when I followed Gandhi's last steps today, I became acutely aware of the fact that India's path towards independence truly was not an easy one. Today, almost 75 years after the murder of Gandhi, there is a close bond between our democracies, a bond that unites us on the basis of shared values: human rights, freedom, democracy, trust in an order based on the law. Thank you very much for the open exchange we had today about all these topics. And this open exchange is possible also because, of course, this is my first official visit to India, but it truly doesn't feel like a first official visit. It rather feels like coming to see a good friend. And the fact that we have met several times already this year at the intergovernmental consultations, as you mentioned, in Berlin, the G20 meeting in Bali, or the UNGA in New York, shows how important the close coordination between friends is to us, especially in this year. The very challenging situation the world finds itself in today makes this more than necessary, and it also illustrates that in these difficult times, it is important that we stand together as partners in values, that we really can grow together, and that we are doing so. My visit today could not be more timely. This month, as you said, India's G20 presidency and your presidency in the UN Security Council overlap with our G7 presidency. So you're also having the presidency of the United Nations Security Council. So, Minister Jai Shankar, I would like to explicitly thank you for assuming the presidency of the G20, not only in a business as usual way, but you also made it very clear in our discussion that this is a very special task and that you will shape with great responsibility. So India is assuming global responsibility in this difficult moment. Responsibility for the most urgent tasks of our time. We have the global impact of the brutal war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, an illegal war that has brought the whole world into a very difficult situation. And it also creates difficulties for your country when it comes to energy supply and fertilizers. We see the climate crisis that has impacts worldwide, in India, in Europe, destroying livelihoods of people. So I am especially delighted that India, during its G20 presidency with the motto One Earth, One Family, One Future, is putting a special focus on containing the climate crisis, thus highlighting our common responsibility when it comes to climate change. As industrialized nations, the G20 are not only responsible for 80% of global emissions, they are also responsible for a major part of climate-induced damage, also climate-induced damage that is still to come. So we are taking concrete steps in this regard as well. Germany and India will further expand their cooperation for accelerating the energy transition. In the framework of the climate conference, we have made available 10 billion euros up to 2030. And last year, for the first projects in 2023, we have agreed on projects worth 1 billion euros, concrete projects intended to support India in covering its big energy demand by switching to socially and ecologically sustainable energy sources. By doing so, we are building on the negotiations we had at the COP, and we show that we stand ready as a partner for India, a partner for more climate protection and renewable energy sources. In addition to the climate crisis as the biggest security threat of our time, we have also, of course, spoken about regional challenges. With the adoption of the Indo-Pacific guidelines, Germany has clearly committed to strengthening the rules-based international order in the Indo-Pacific area on the basis of the UN Charter. With the visit of the frigate Bayern in Mumbai at the beginning of the year, we have also shown in this regard that we underpin these guidelines with concrete actions. In the future, we want to further intensify German-Indian cooperation in the field of security policy. So Germany wants to engage in the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative initiated by Prime Minister Modi. We are also putting a focus on the areas of climate and energy, and we will in particular support the Pacific states in their adaptation to climate change. And also when it comes to the bond between our people, that is so important, we are taking concrete steps today. With the Migration and Mobility Partnership that we have just signed, we are facilitating exchange between our countries. We are supporting With the Migration and Mobility Partnership, we are supporting the life plans of skilled workers, students, and trainees. In concrete terms, we also want to cut red tape, for example, by reducing waiting times for such visa applications. Because foreign policy not only means that foreign ministers meet, it also means that there are many people can have contacts with the other country, can live together. I know that with a view to this exchange in India, I know that many Indians have to wait for a long time when they ask for a visa at our embassy. So one of our big tasks is to reduce the waiting times for such applications. We want highly skilled workers and young people to come to Germany. We want to make it easier for them to study here, to work here, or to start a training program. And we also want to make it easier for German investors and companies to establish a presence in India. Already now, Germany is India's biggest trading partner in the EU. And with this agreement, we are setting the tracks to further intensifying our economic relations in the future, because in order to be economically successful, you need brilliant minds and a lot of innovative potential. We are supporting both with this migration and mobility partnership. As the biggest democracy and emerging economy, India is a role model for many other countries across the globe. And it is therefore ever more important that all parts of society can benefit from that, especially women and girls, who make up half of our population in all our countries. So, as with many visits I will also use my visit to India to speak with representatives of NGOs who stand up for the rights and the protection of women and girls. Mr. Subramaniam, I would like to thank you for the warm welcome you have given me here in New Delhi, but especially I would like to thank you for the intensive exchange we had over this year, especially in these difficult times. It is so important to speak in a confidential setting about topics where there might be different regional perspectives, but where we see every time that we are partners in values and really stand shoulder to shoulder. This is more important than ever. And I'm looking very much forward to our next meeting that will happen rather shortly at the beginning of spring in the framework of the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting. And I would like to thank you very much for the hospitality in your beautiful country.
Hi sir, hi ma'am, I'm Siddhant from Beyond. My question to you sir is, was there any discussion regarding India's relationship with Afghanistan and Pakistan? And ma'am, to you, you're a very clear-headed, forthright leader. Can you share to the Indian audience your concerns regarding China?
Yes, actually we had fairly extensive discussions both on Afghanistan and Pakistan. A lot of it was on Afghanistan was our respective assessments of how the situation there is. And you know, the Indian perspective, which I know Germany shares, there's a UN Security Council Resolution 2593, which largely expresses the views of the international community out there. So how do we today assess it, the humanitarian situation, what can we do about it? I think these were some of the issues which came up. Regarding Pakistan, I spent some time with the minister outlining, you know, the nature of our ties, the challenge of cross-border terrorism, and essentially the fact that, you know, we engage Pakistan bilaterally on whatever outstanding issues, but the main challenge today is really the fact that we cannot have talks while there is terrorism. And I think there was understanding from the German side in this regard.
Yes, with a view to China. As our European friends, we pursue a tripartite approach that is enshrined in our coalition treaty as well. Almost to the day, we have been in office for a year, and we are pursuing a strategy with 3 parts. China is seen as a partner in global challenges, a competitor, and increasingly as a systemic rival as well. China has changed very much over the last few years, and I think the whole region can see this and feel this. So the exchange with actors from the region is very important to us, especially India as a direct neighbor. This is very important for us to have a good assessment of the challenges ahead. One of the newer points in our China strategy is the Indo-Pacific strategy. We will have more diversification in the Indo-Pacific area. There is huge potential for German and European companies. Until now, we've been focusing very much on China, but there are also ties with India and Japan, but not so many with many other neighboring countries. And when it comes to India, we have both highlighted that there is huge potential for further cooperation, both in terms of economic ties, but also when it comes to the security situation. In Germany, we have seen what it means when you become strongly dependent on one country, a country that does not share your values. So with a view to the political and security policy aspects and developments in the region, we will closely cooperate with our partners in the region.
Upon Ms. Alice Botha from the Zeit to ask her question.
Herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much. Foreign Minister Baerbock, one question to you. Is India now a substitute partner for China? And a question to Foreign Minister Jaishankar. Russia has sent a comprehensive list of requests or demands or wishes to India. In how far is this list different from the past? And will you comply with that list? And can I add, India counts very much on negotiations, and Russia has clearly outlined the preconditions for negotiations. Part of this means the recognition of annexed territory in Ukraine. Do you think this is a legitimate foundation, and will you still call for negotiations?
Nein.
No, that's a very brief answer to the substitute partner. No, India has always been a partner for Germany and a partner for the European Union as well. This partnership, however, is something that we want to deepen further and that we want to expand further. Last year, we have seen in a very brutal way across the globe that there are very different kinds of partnerships. There are friendships, there are partners in values, and we are connected with India not only by an economic partnership, but a partnership when it comes to people-to-people connections, and also a partnership of values, and that is different from other countries in the region. And this partnership of values is something we want to further expand. As the biggest democracy in the world, India is exemplary, is a role model for many other countries in the world. So especially when it comes to strengthening our joint democratic values, and also when we stand up together for international law, we want to expand our cooperation, and the same is true for economic relations. Last year too, we've seen in a very brutal way that when we have deep economic ties with partners who are not partners in values, this has economic repercussions, dramatic repercussions for our economies, and this is not in our economic interest.
Regarding what you referred to as a list, we have been discussing for some years now with Russia how to expand our trade. Our trade with Russia is really quite small. I would say generally it's been in the $12–13 billion level. If you compare it to most European countries, most of them have multiple times that trade. It's not something which, a discussion which started after February 24. It's a discussion which has been going on before. I myself have been involved in this discussion for 8 years now. I currently, in fact, head a body with a Russian Deputy Prime Minister as a counterpart, which is dedicated to actually expanding our economic cooperation. And we have faced challenges. It often happens in trade, phytosanitary standards or non-tariff barriers or regulatory impediments. So at the moment, the discussion, the ongoing discussion and what either side can import from each other, that is the context in which it is taking place. Now, what we have tabled between us, because I would in all fairness also tell you, we have also given the Russians a set of I would say products which we believe we are very competitive in and which we feel should be getting access to the Russian market. And as I said again, this is not a post-February 24 conversation. It is something which has been going on for some time. So when it looks to what we could be doing, we will see where there is a demand and supply and where there is a fit. I think largely a large part of it would be determined by market, because in our country business is mostly in private sector hands. But I don't think people should read anything more into it other than the legitimate expectations of any trading country to increase its trade. On your second question about negotiations, look, the Indian position has been very clear and very public. The Indian position articulated by my Prime Minister is that this is not an era of war, that dialogue and diplomacy is the answer. It is a position which, by the way, the G20 has also accepted. It was found expression in their Bali declaration. But what is the basis for people to have that dialogue is for the countries concerned. You know, it's not for India to specify or to advocate or to condition. That is not our intention. That has not been our approach. It is something which the parties involved will have to decide among us.
Thank you. Now I ask Mr. Neeraj Kumar from News 18 to ask his question.
Hi ma'am, hi sir. What were the discussions on baby Ariha? My question to both of you.
Well, I tried to anticipate your question by partly putting that out. I know there's a lot of, it's something which has been very much in the media on the Indian side. In fairness, I think what I have said, which is that, in our view, baby Ariha should be in a position to reside in an environment, a linguistic, religious, cultural, social environment, which is natural to her. That is our effort. I think it's a very delicate matter. There are privacy issues involved in it. So I think both governments are handling it with that very much in mind. So I think that's as much as I can say publicly.
Yes, your question would be about my position on that case when it comes to the protection of a child's well-being in Germany, and it's similar in India. The youth offices are responsible for that. But as a mother of two daughters, I would like to say that for me, the well-being of Aliyah Shah is very important to me. So I have received detailed information about this case. I can assure you that the child is well, and for everybody in India and for everybody in Germany and the German authorities most particularly, the child's well-being is the first priority. And of course, we are also bearing in mind the cultural identity of each child that is taken care of by the youth offices in Germany. Children are only taken in custody by the youth office if there are serious concerns about their well-being, for example, violence, sexual abuse, or severe neglect. So, as has been said by my distinguished colleague, it is about privacy rights as well, so we cannot say more at this point. The case is still pending in court, and after the verdict, of course, there can be a review. But for us, what is most important, the first priority, is the well-being of the child.
Thank you, ma'am. To Ms. Sibyl Licht from ARD.
Ja, guten Tag. Eine erste Frage.
One first question to Minister Baerbock. You have already said Germany is making available 1 billion euros to India for a faster transformation process, a switch to solar energy, phasing out coal finally, because electricity production from coal is still a big part of energy supply in India. What do you think about the time frame? How fast can India phase out coal? Because that was a hot topic being discussed at the climate conference in Egypt. And
Shankar, India has extended the import of Russian oil. It is a totally opposite position of the European sanctions, actually. Will you change your attitude during the G20 presidency? Thank you.
Well, when it comes to phasing out coal, every country needs to decide for itself. I remember very well how difficult it was for us to start phasing out of coal in Germany. Back then I was a member of parliament. I was not yet foreign minister. And 7 years ago, there have been debates in Germany about whether you could even speak about phasing out coal, because phasing out coal meant that many jobs linked to that would be lost. So in Germany, it was very important for us that we do this phase out together with the trade unions, with the companies involved, that we have a social security scheme to buffer the effects for people. And we've made billions of euros available in Germany for that, both when it comes to social security for the people involved and also for developing the specific regions, especially in the east of Germany, that were affected by that phase out. So I will not travel the world as a foreign minister and tell others you have to do this way. It is something that you need to do on the ground. And what is important, I think, is what we've learned in Germany. You can have a smooth process. It is not a disruption. And this is something we can feed in as ideas and suggestions to other partners. So the Paris Agreement clearly states that by 2050, industrialized nations need to become climate neutral, and all the other countries in the middle of the towards the end of the century. And what we've seen is that we need to phase out faster. And at the climate conference, some states highlighted this very clearly. As the EU, we have even raised our ambitions with our climate goals. In India and Germany, we have started a special partnership on climate to accelerate the process. When it comes to per capita emissions, we have to say very clearly that India is clearly below the per capita emissions of Germany or the EU. And at the same time, India is one of the most populous nations of the world. So the government has made it clear that when it comes to emissions, there needs to be a switch, there needs to be a sort of phase out, and the 1 billion for 2023 is dedicated to many projects for renewable energy sources. We will travel to a village tomorrow where renewable energy sources are being used. That is a big opportunity for countries that need further electrification. And this electrification should not be based on fossil fuels, as the industrialized nations have done in the past, but that all areas switch to renewable energies immediately. And this is what this money is intended for, but also for the mobility sector and agriculture.
On your question about fossil fuel imports from Russia, I think first we need to establish the facts very clearly. The European Union, between February 24th and 17th November, has imported more fossil fuel from Russia than the next 10 countries combined. Just as I were to give you an India comparison, the oil import in European Union is like 6 times what India has imported. Gas is infinity times because we don't import, whereas European Union has imported $50 billion worth, 50 billion euros worth. Even coal imports from Russia by European Union, I'm not singling any particular country, is 50% more than India has imported. So the remark that you made that, this is the way the European Union is going and this is the way India is going, I would very respectfully suggest maybe European Union is actually doing something very much more than India is doing at this point of time. Having said that, look, I think we need to have an understanding among governments and frankly even within the media. There is a finite amount of energy resources available in the world. I understand there is a conflict situation. I also understand Europe has a point of view. And Europe will make the choices it will make. That is Europe's right. But for Europe to make choices which prioritizes its energy needs and then ask India to do something else. And bear in mind, today Europe is buying a lot from the Middle East. Now, Middle East was traditionally a supplier for an economy like India. So it puts pressure on prices in the Middle East as well. So we have been very, very understanding of European choices and European policies. I think my own sense is most governments in the world, European governments get it. I wish European media also got it. It would be very helpful. I would urge you to look at these figures. There's actually a website called Russia Fossil Fuel Tracker. It would give you, country by country who's really importing what, and I suspect that might be very, very helpful.
Thank you, Honourable Minister.